Good morning. You are with the Citizen Body. My name is Suzanne Hill, and I am your host. The Citizen Body, this is the place for our bodycast where we talk all things Citizen Body, including how do we engage more with our communities and what do we do to kind of get through life as we've known it. Everything has really changed a lot since COVID has happened. And what we're trying to do is just find a way to focus on what unites us. So today I have with me Brian Pieri, who is the owner and operator at the Pieri Group, which is Pieri Hospitality Group, I believe is the name of the company, Brian?
Correct.
Yep, so Pieri Hospitality Group, and they own 3 restaurants. So for those of you who are not local to us, we are outside of Philadelphia, about 25 minutes or so, and we're in a small town called Conshohocken. Some of us live here, and all 3 restaurants are actually located in our town. And they're Bar Luca, Bar Sarah, and the first one I think that you opened was the Stone Rose.
That's correct, yeah.
Yep. So what got you into the restaurant business and how long's it been?
So we opened the first one, as you mentioned, the Stone Rose in 2009. And I came from a completely unrelated field. I was a stockbroker for almost 11 years and moved to Conshohocken for most of that time. Really loved the town. And there was an older bar at the top of my street called the Y2K Tavern. That had about one little slot window that was never open. And, you almost didn't know what was going on inside. And, and I hit 30, 31 years old. I'd walk my dog past there. They often started the bar up, at 7 o'clock in the morning for some of the overnight shift crowd. And it just seemed like a bar that was fading in popularity and upkeep. And I'd kind of hit a point in my life where I wanted to be able to walk to the top of my street and stay local and sit down and have a nice glass of wine. And there's lots of pubs and other type places in town, but there are very few places where I wanted to hang out. So it went up for sale during the housing crisis and no one bought it. And I eventually just kind of poked around, and I probably had a weird afternoon where I thought this would be fun. And next thing I knew, I owned a really old bar, and it kind of just spiraled from there. So there was not a lot of intention. It kind of went from a thought to, kind of being on the hook to get it done in about 30 to 60 days of my life. So it was kind of one of those weird periods where things just kind of took a rapid left turn. And kind of everything just kind of spiraled and dominated from there. So that was kind of the starting point for us.
Wow. And then how long, so what happened? What made you want to expand?
So, I mean, the first year when we had Stone Rose, my initial thought process, which lasted about an hour, was I would just buy this place, hire some young restaurateur, maybe a chef, let them run it. I would keep my old job, and kind of be a landlord or an absentee owner. And, I kind of had one of those moments we started kind of pulling the bones apart of the restaurant where I said, I kind of want to do this and I want to be able to be here. And I'm also kind of the person who doesn't think that you just, buy a house and it rents itself, and buy a business and it runs itself. I kind of grew up in a different, mentality than that, from some of my, what my family did. And I just said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to jump in. So I sold my share in my, previous business, and we kind of just got it rolling. And, you realize the restaurant business, even if you're busy, is not an incredibly profitable business. So we just got it started with the mindset, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. And, when we feel comfortable, we're going to try and not just be 20 years from now, we still have the same thing we started, with the Stone Rose. Let's grow a brand, let's grow a company, and, let's kind of go with that mentality. So first year, we didn't do a lot of expanding. We did a lot of surviving. But pretty quickly we decided that, as we kind of got our feet under us, I wanted to, make this bigger than just one place.
Yeah. And you did. How many does each of the restaurants hold?
So Stone Rose is our smallest, depending on whether you consider outside or not. It's usually about a 60 to 80 seat restaurant. Bar Luca is our largest, and you can hold about 125 to 140 people there, depending on normal times, not tents and parking lots and things we're doing now. And then Bar Sarah is right in between, where they can hold usually about 80 to 100 people, depending on the season. So they're a little bit all over. They're all pretty small in general restaurant terms, and you compare them to a 200-300 seat corporate restaurant. but Bar Luca is significantly bigger than the other two.
Mhm. And yeah, I go to Bar Luca a lot. So it's one of my favorite places. It's always our special occasion
Oh,
place
good.
to go. It's actually where my partner and I, we had our first date was Bar Luca.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Cool. That's one of
yeah.
the cool parts about the restaurants is you find out so many people either started there or found each other there or met there, or, you know, it's pretty neat. That's one of the better parts of it.
Yeah, and I remember when I was single, and like at the time when you opened the Stone Rose, I lived in I lived in Bridgeport, which is one town over,
Right.
and both just for again for people who are not local, Bridgeport and Conshohocken are kind of like more like working class towns, and Conshohocken has really seen much more of an expansion in recent years. The restaurants that we're speaking of, the first one is really like right on the main road that runs through town, where the other two are tucked into the neighborhood. But I remember the Stone Rose was the place to go. Like, you know, like if you had a blind date, that was where you met. That's where you met up. And I just remember, just like, you know, that was the place that it was always it was very nice. It's well decorated inside. It has a really nice casual vibe to it, but it's also a place where you're like, all right, I'm not wearing my jeans and sneakers in here. I'm getting a little dressed up. I'm going out. Yeah, it's not just a casual, you know, the spot that you stop in and, you know, grab a beer and a sandwich, but you can grab a beer and a sandwich there. And the food's great. So how'd you get started with, what type of food you wanted to serve?
So, you know, my initial thought was that, you know, I grew up, you know, I come from a Tuscan family. We celebrated everything, including a Wednesday, a Tuesday, a birthday, a holiday. It was always about what we were having for dinner. You know, food was always kind of the center of the equation. But I didn't want my first place to really reflect, you know, just that traditional, I guess, Italian upbringing, because I thought the town could use something a little bit more unique and kind of being able to have a little bit of a broader, you know, spectrum of what we could bring in. So we went with sort of a wine bar, New American menu, and we tried to sort of push, you know, back then, especially 11 years ago, there was probably only 2 or 3 places in town that would actually have a menu that had the name of the wine on it. You know, you could get a glass of wine at the pub or a bar, but it was, you know, it was really still kind of transitioning to a town of, you know, where people wanted to go out and, you know, talk about some more unique food items, a wine list, a whiskey list. These were things that were almost non-existent, you know, 10, 12 years ago. So we kind of wanted to push the envelope a little bit and say, you know, where can we kind of have a broader range menu that we can bring in some unique items? Where can we have a different beverage menu where we could, you know, kind of bring in a global wine list, so that people didn't see us as, oh, it's Italian food, Italian wine. You know, we kind of took that step with our second place. So we kind of had a really open-ended menu concept, and, you know, it was kind of the more the more we looked into it. And that's really how we kind of drove, you know, our initial brand with the launch of the Stone Rose.
Yeah. And then, how many years later did you open Bar Luca?
So Bar Luca was 4 years later, 2013. That was the old Trattoria, or I'm sorry, the old Tataro's restaurant that was at the time the longest running restaurant in the area. They had been there for, I believe it was 51 years at the time of the transition. So that was a pretty historic transfer for their family, and kind of a neat opportunity for us to, you know, kind of start a new chapter there.
Yeah. And then I think that menu focuses a little bit more Italian, like more in the Italian roots in
So
that one,
that's
correct?
Italian roots. We try to really have a hyper focus on Tuscan Italian food, which, you know, is a little bit varied from, you know, kind of the traditional red sauce that you see a lot in the Eastern Seaboard, New York, Philadelphia. So it was neat. There's a lot of familiar dishes that I think people were comfortable with in the kind of the Italian, you know, menu concept, but there was a lot of things that people wonder, you know, what kind of restaurant is this? Your meatballs don't have a red gravy poured all over them. What are these? You know, and some of the foods that we served and the pasta dishes are, you know, more brown sauces and mushrooms and beans and things that you don't typically see at, you know, a more traditional, you know, Italian American type restaurant.
Yeah. And speaking of which, with mushrooms and beans and everything, I probably jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but I guess COVID hit then, and then we had a much more challenging time, probably, especially for being a restaurant owner, because now at this point, when COVID happens, you've got 3 restaurants.
Yeah.
And one of them, when we're talking about taking risks, tell me a little bit about the third restaurant before we dive into adapting to change.
So the third restaurant is Bar Sarah. We actually changed the concept in the midst of COVID. Our restaurant before that was called Cerdo, and it was a Spanish Mediterranean small plates restaurant. And it produced some of our best food. However, COVID hit, and in the beginning we sort of took a mentality of just kind of batten down the hatches, and let's kind of get to a place where we're strong enough to kind of endure 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. I laugh because I remember our first meeting after kind of the news broke of closures and things like that. I said, let's prepare for 8 weeks, because they're saying 2, everyone's whispering 4. Let's prepare for 8 in case worst case scenario happens. And for 8 weeks, we're dealing with this coronavirus, which was, boy, the dumbest thing I've ever planned for. So once we kind of got to 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks, we realized this is kind of more of a long haul type scenario. We realized we were sitting on restaurants that were doing 70, 80% of their business in takeout. And that having a menu that was built for sharing small plates and doesn't really travel well really put us at a disadvantage. Not a lot of people are ordering small portions of octopus to go through DoorDash. So we felt particularly, I guess, disadvantaged, with that concept. So we kind of talked about it for a little bit and said, we have 2 choices: just ride it out and, kind of use every avenue of the adaptation we can think of to kind of, brace ourselves. Or let's do something we probably will seem stupid for doing. Let's change a concept in the middle of a COVID, pandemic. So we went with the latter, and we tried to really make it fun, and we really tried to make it something positive, because there wasn't a lot of positive things going on in the restaurant business. So we changed from Cerdo to Bar Sarah. And, the menu was much more takeout friendly. It was much more, people stopping by to pick up their lunch who were working at home. And it really, it was both good for morale and the team to kind of have something positive to dive into. But it was also good for business, and, so far so good, I guess we'll say. But, it's really a lot easier to sell, some of the items on that menu than, for to go than it was the prior.
Yeah. Cerdo, if I'm not mistaken, your featured dish at Cerdo was wild boar.
We had a lot of wild boar. I mean, I can say it now because it's not in existence, but I think Cerdo was my favorite place to actually eat out of my 3 restaurants. And the 2 challenges were, it was the most unique. We really kind of pushed the envelope. At one point we were cutting, prosciuttos and jamones on the bar in front of everybody. And I think for the suburban market, it was fascinating to some and strange to others. So it's kind of neat for me. But then, those kind of things really didn't work well once, the good old pandemic rolled into town. So.
Yeah, I enjoyed Cerdo. I'm not a meat eater myself, but I really enjoyed, I remember there was like a seafood pasta dish that you had there. So you could still go there and find something if you were somebody who was not going to experiment more with the wild boar. But I remember you guys always had like creative, like cheese boards and different things on the menu that, you can say, hey, I can try a little something different without going totally out there.
Right.
Or you could just go totally out there and have like a wild boar burger, or I don't know if you've served it as a steak as well, but it was an interesting concept. And just, as somebody who enjoys following a small business, it's like, okay, what is this taking off? Like, what's it doing?
Yeah, it was kind of weird and wild for us because, our customer base is so diverse, and, you have customers who come in and, the more unique or the more off the beaten path, the happier they are. And then you have a lot of people, especially in the culture of, the suburbs in America, that they want what they want. And when you're more off the beaten path, it creates a lot more unique, interactions with, those customers. And most of the time it's fun, you're watching somebody who doesn't even know what this is and they want to try it. But it's definitely a lot easier to sell, a traditional burger, wings, quesadilla type menu than it was to, talk about, aged hams on a bar being hand sliced on a plate, to someone who's kind of looking for like a chicken dinner. So it was fun. It was a shame that it got kind of, tsunamied by the pandemic. But I think some of my best meals I ever had were there. So,
Yeah, agreed. It was there. It was very good.
yeah.
And it's interesting how you really had to adapt to that change with COVID. So, talk me through that. Like you had your first meeting, you prepared for what you thought was going to be the long haul, and here we still are over a year later, and we're just starting to talk about opening back up.
Yeah, so I was actually leaving my accountant's office for a routine, spring accounting level meeting, and my phone was going berserk. And it was my wife and some other business owners in town, and they're all talking about this press conference of Wolf, and they think he's going to tell us to kind of chill out with the crowds. And it was the week leading up to St. Patrick's Day Saturday. So obviously there was a lot of bars, especially the pubs and, those kind of restaurants, were planning massive celebrations and bands and on all this kind of stuff. And we met, and I believe it was either Thursday, and, kind of had all of our own ideas with, we had no idea. We had no idea what this disease really was about. We had no idea. We were really kind of talking without the expertise we probably needed, but just kind of getting all the restaurant owners that we could into a room saying, like, how are we going to handle this? Or is anybody backing down their capacity? Things that we've never had to discuss before as a group. And then obviously, the government stepped in within the next 48 hours and kind of made those decisions for us and, changed the rules instantaneously. I think we had to call reservations on a Saturday and say that, you're the last reservations. As of tomorrow, we're no longer taking indoor dining. So I think by Monday we were fully takeout only, which was nuts. I think that first week we were down about 85-90% in a week. So, pretty much going from normal week sales, and, the weekend kind of tailed off because I think the word spread like wildfire that this thing is a little bit more real than maybe we thought a week or two prior. And then it just went to nothing. And even with takeout, people didn't really know, like, was leaving your house going to get you sick? Was touching a box going to get you sick? So it wasn't like everyone was just lining up around the corner, ready to switch their feeding patterns. It was everyone just kind of bunkered in and, ate what was on your shelf, and it was a ghost town. So it was remarkable in that it was so rapid.
Yeah.
So, we just had to kind of take that speed and say, we have to run at this speed because it's not going to slow down for us.
Yeah. And as a small business owner, you've got to, we talk on the Citizen Body a lot about, vote small, news small, shop small. And, I think eat small really kind of falls into shop small because you are a small business owner. And what do you do then? Or you're like, okay, you've lost like 85 to 90% of your business. You still got people to pay. You've got rent. You got food to put on your own table.
Yeah.
How do you do it? What'd you do?
I mean, in the beginning, you have to make some, assumptions that you're going to be able to just kind of build a stable foundation under your team. You had to spend a lot of energy, really reassuring everybody that we're going to figure out a way, that, their concerns, which, sometimes are the business, but sometimes are their personal lives, which, especially in that extreme of a situation, you can understand, their ability to earn a paycheck, their ability to feed their own families kind of jumps to the head of the line when those things are threatened. So you spend a lot of your time just communicating. I would say it's probably the most transparent, open, and direct I've been with my staff, in the 12 years almost I've been doing this, because you have to, because you don't know if there's a cook, on the other side of the kitchen who's having a massive anxiety attack, that he's going to lose his job in 2 days. And that if he's, sort of paycheck to paycheck, or, things are thin at home, that can have a really quick domino effect, because we didn't know anything yet. We didn't know anything about, funding programs and unemployment, and, kind of everything just kind of came and snowballed at once. So we spent really the first week or two just really battening down the hatches, communicating with our staff. My management team sprinting as fast as they can to turn a dining room into a supply room. I mean, we basically had pallets of, to-go boxes and containers, coming in fast so we can, open them. The dining room where people would have their rehearsal dinner, now had shelves in it with, thousands and thousands of cardboard containers and pizza boxes and things like that. So it was just a time that, I had to be present a lot. I had to be transparent a lot, and we had to move fast. And, we kind of had a no one left behind mentality as a team, and saying that we don't really know what the future is going to hold, but if we kind of all go elbow to elbow, like we'll figure it out. And I think that, the entire staff really bought into it. And, we were fortunate that, we had enough credibility amongst each other to, especially the first month or two, until you really had clarity of like what was coming, how long is this going to last, what assistance is available. So it was interesting. It was a lot of faith and a lot of, kind of committing to each other. Because, it wasn't like, we saw 10, 15, 20% decrease in sales. We saw 80, 90, the bank accounts dry up pretty quick. A business that runs on a 10% profit margin loses 90% of its sales.
And now you're also having to spend money and, to purchase these takeout, like you just said, shelves and shelves of takeout containers that you didn't have to have before.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking thousands and a takeout container might only cost you 15 cents, but there's thousands and thousands of them at 3 restaurants, and bags and safety precaution stuff and hand sanitizer that you couldn't find, and food that you couldn't find for a short period of time. So it was pretty wild. It was nuts. Yeah.
And I noticed, in our town and probably towns all across America, one of the things that's popped up has been those the tents. So, at some point, then you got the tent outside.
Yep.
As well.
So yeah, we have a big old 1,800 square foot tent at Bar Luca, and then up until actually 3 days ago, we had a smaller tent outside of Stone Rose. We finally got to a point now where it was more advantageous to kind of spread out outside and get rid of the tent. But yeah, once they allowed outside, which was later spring, early summer, you pretty much had to say, how do I maximize every inch of mulch, cement, parking lot, deck space that you had, because that was your dining room. That was it. That's all you had. So you had to really figure it out and adapt really quickly.
Yeah, because I noticed your tables of like at Bar Luca, your tables from indoors, all of a sudden now they're out in the parking lot. They're covered over by a tent. You've also had to invest in heaters for outdoors in the wintertime. I think we ate at Bar Luca on New Year's Eve in the outdoor area. Yep. And you were able to continue the tradition of where you would serve a meal where you have like a 4-course meal. It's a set price. You get your appetizer or salad, your main course, your dessert, and there was a little something else in there too that I'm probably skipping, like a soup or a salad or something at the beginning of the meal. And you were able to continue with that tradition, but it just looked different. We just sat outside.
Yeah, I mean, people, it was 40 degrees out or whatever it was. People sat outside. I mean, we have greenhouse heaters. We always joke that when this is over, we're going to have the most killer garage sale, because I have so many things that are just going to be irrelevant in hopefully 6 months or a year at some point.
That was my next question. Do they become irrelevant, or do they make your restaurant a bigger place? Like when things go back to what we're going to call the new normal, is outdoor dining, do you now have more space for outdoor dining? Do you get rid of it, or do you keep it going? Did you rent the tents or did you buy them?
So we actually rented them. I'm the kind of person who would have thought, let's just buy these. We're going to keep them. For Bar Luca, especially, it was almost 2,000 square feet. And I quickly realized that I'm a little bit more cavalier than I would say, local townships and code officials and things like that. So to me, I just started shopping around for a tent, was going to put up a tent, and realized that there was, even though, people were being very supportive locally in terms of, letting you do things they normally wouldn't let you do, there was still a process in terms of, safety code inspections and certain things you had to have for hurricanes and weights and fire extinguishing. So it got to the point where I said, we're just going to rent this tent and put this responsibility on somebody else. Because you never think about it. And ironically, the day that the Bar Luca tent went live, I actually put something on my Instagram. And it was the day that those squall storms came through and we had 60, 70 mile an hour winds. And the tent was set up 36 hours prior. So the first day we're about to advertise we have outdoor seating in our tent. It looked like it was probably going to take off and end up somewhere in the Schuylkill River. And we're just hoping maybe not cover a tractor trailer on the expressway. But it survived. And I said, we're just going to rent this. And I don't care what it costs, because I don't need to be trying to figure out how to learn physics of how big a 2,000 square foot tent can fly and wind speeds and wind speeds and fire extinguishers. I said, you know what? I don't care what it costs. we're going to outsource this one. So we did, we rented it, but that was a huge expense. You know, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars on tents. I have 30 propane heaters, and you didn't even know what you needed. So if they were available, you just bought everything you could. It was kind of like you had a couple drinks at the bar and went home or just shopping on Amazon. That was kind of your mentality, because you didn't have time to sit there and say, well, how many square feet and how many heaters do I need? There were no heaters. And then someone would get heaters in, and there would be, you know, a 24-hour period where you could buy heaters that weren't, you know, marked up 400% because everybody needed a heater. So if there was 8 available, I would just buy 8. If there was plexiglass available, I would just buy it, not knowing even where I was going to put it, just so I was never able to, you know, not operate because I didn't have plexiglass. So you just have like mountains of this stuff now. And, you know, I probably have hand sanitizer and heating elements to run a small city at this point. So. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I was thinking, like, if, you know, you see your revenue go down all of a sudden, and now you see your expenses with all of these items go skyrocketing.
Yeah.
And you still survive. I mean, I come from, you know, my partner and I work in, we both work in healthcare. He works in a small business. And for us, life really didn't change. We didn't miss a day of work, you know, and you think of how fortunate you are to have that, you know, like, you know, you know, we're on the front lines. However, like, life didn't change that much. And one of the first things he said to me, he goes, we got to make sure the restaurants stay open. And we were like, we got takeout, you know, from Bar Luca, from, you know, from Bar, we started going to Bar Sarah and getting, you know, I wasn't on cheese and dairy for a while, but I love your butternut squash pizza. I've
seen you guys sit at the bar. I mean, that was great. It was really wonderful.
Yeah. And, you know, we've been doing takeout, and then after a while you're like, boy, this is really going to get expensive. And then I'm sitting in the back of my head thinking, I'm watching how much money you're having to lay out. And it's like, is my simple little takeout order even like help? Does it even help?
It does. And beyond the actual dollars that the order brought in, I mean, takeout really, I mean, it carried us. I mean, the losses would have been a lot bigger. I think when I just recently looked for a grant application, our line item for takeout was up, I think, 350% year over year. So if you really see, like, we still lost a lot of revenue throughout the course of the year. To have a segment of your business go up almost, you know, 350 to 400% and still have a big loss, you realize what amount of that hole, thankfully, you know, takeout and digital and all that kind of stuff really replaced. So it really mattered, but it also mattered that it gave us contact with our customers. You know, they would have to come in, pick up a bag, or even who walked out to their car. You know, everyone was very generous with their tipping, which was great for our staff. And it was also just good for morale, just seeing people. You know, the first week or two when no one knew if they felt safe coming in a restaurant to grab their bag. I mean, the hardest part about convincing people to want to work wasn't the money. It was 3 people would sit in a room that was just completely empty and quiet, which is the opposite of their job was for the, you know, the previous year or 2 or however long they've been working there. I mean, restaurants are lively. You walk in and there's music and TV, people, and there's a hum. And now it's 3 people kind of staring at their phones and an order here and there. And it was awkward. And I think the people starting to come back and get takeout, it didn't replace the old vibe, but it helped keep it alive. And they would say, thank you. And we miss you guys. And, you know, that kind of helped during, I think, the hardest, you know, stretch.
Yeah. And speaking of people, you have how many people do you have working for you in the restaurants?
I think we're back up to 90 something. Our peak was about 120, 125 pre-pandemic, and we're back into the 90s. We'd like to probably be at 100, but it's been challenging, we'll say, to revamp from a low base. But you know, we're back to about 90, I think.
Yeah. And how, like, the folks that you hire, are they usually a little bit older, younger?
You know, it kind of varies. I was fortunate. We have a management team that, you know, most of them in their 20s and 30s. So it's kind of that middle generation, you know, Gen X, millennials, I guess. And they stayed with us. We were able to keep them all on board throughout the entire pandemic, which was, you know, super helpful. And then you have, you know, sort of your other staff, your culinary staff and your front of house staff, and they tend to probably skew heavily towards the younger side. And then when you go to jobs like, you know, hostess and bussers and things like that, they tend to be, you know, even younger. But you get some variation. You know, you get somebody who wants to, you know, just stand at the door and host and be, you know, super personable. who could do a job that's kind of further up the chain, but they like kind of being at the door and talking on the phone. But I would say overall, I'm 43 and I feel like an old person walking through my restaurants.
Yeah.
So, I'll talk about things thinking I'm young and hip, and they're like, oh yeah, my mom loves that. And it's like, okay, great.
I do that. I do that at work. I ask a lot of our younger kids, I'll ask some of them some questions. I'll ask them, I say, can you name 5 Michael Jackson songs? And like early 20s. Most of them can get through about 2 or 3, and then they start to struggle. Nobody knows what Graceland is or where it's located. And just like some other things, it was just general history and things that we grew up knowing, and it was like, oh yeah. And then I'll say, now you ask me some of your questions, and they go, well, everything's kind of about apps. And I'm like, okay, try me. And it's interesting. That's what they find relevant about their generation is what's in the phone. Oh. And I'm like, wow. Like generation stuff just fascinates me. I don't know, but
it's a big, you could tell who was pre-2000 and let's call it 8, 9, 10 and had part of their life, pre-technology, part with some, part with all, and those who've only known technology. I mean, there's a personality and vision of life gap that's it's huge. It's challenging sometimes. It's interesting to others, but it's nuts.
Yeah. I know we were even talking about like you and I, did you grow up working in a restaurant at all, or
so I was
different jobs?
In my middle teen years. I think I was 15, 16 years old. That was actually the only restaurant experience. I always like to joke that's the only restaurant experience I've ever had. So I'm really only qualified to work the dishwashing station, which is probably still true today. But that was it. And then I kind of had my dad was a big advocate of my jobs being terrible. He kind of parented by, know the worst and hardest job you can have and decide if you like it, great. But if you want to do something easier, then you have to figure out a way. You have to go to school, you have to develop a skill. So his parenting method, I think, was pretty much putting you in the worst position possible, and then you deciding if you want to stay there or, figuring out a way through education or trying or entrepreneurism or whatever to not be there. If you don't want to pick up heavy rocks, go figure out a way not to pick up heavy rocks. Yeah. So it was a unique parenting style, but I worked a couple years in a restaurant, and it's hard. I mean, restaurant kitchens are a hard place to work.
Yeah. Do you find it's difficult to recruit people to work?
Yes, there's really been 2 dynamics. One has been making it slightly difficult for the last 4 or 5 years. And that is that, I would say it's really 3 things. One is the younger, and I don't want to sound like an older person saying, the kids these days, but the younger generation doesn't seem to have to work as much in terms of, they have a lot of other things. They're busier. They have a lot more activities. They have a lot more, sports that were competitive 20 years ago are way more competitive now in terms of just their commitments and stuff like that. And I think a lot of parents will pay for things for children in order to let them focus more on school and activities and things like that. I think there's a mindset difference. There are not a lot of local suburban kids who come in and say, hey, do you have dishwashing available? I'd like to go wash dishes. And we pay pretty well. I mean, you can walk in with no experience and be 17 and it's 12, 13 bucks an hour. And if you learn a skill quickly, you're at 13, 14, it's not like we're paying minimum wage. And it just doesn't happen. We don't get applicants anymore. It used to be small amount of applicants and then almost none, but now we just get none. I mean, if, the local younger generation, kind of 22, 23 and under, they either want to come in and be a bartender and work Saturday nights and kind of run the bar, or they don't want to work in a restaurant. You'll get a few that you can have do like hostessing and things like that, but it's just way down. And then I think the competition for that level of employee has really broadened out. You can go work for Uber now, you can go work for DoorDash and make a similar hourly wage and have a little bit more flexibility and work when you want. And, I think that's a big cultural thing, kind of doing what people want when they want to do it versus the old school mentality of you get to work at 4 o'clock, you show up at 3:45 and, you kind of do your job and that's your job. Now they don't want to work 8 hours in a row. They don't want to not be able to access their phone, their friends and other things. And I think that that's just really made it challenging. And then the pandemic has just kind of scattered everybody. And everyone's now hiring. So, you know, every construction outfit in America is trying to build houses and keep up with demand. And, you know, every landscaper is 3 months booked because everyone's fixing up their houses. So every industry we kind of compete with, you know, I think is kind of going after that same person. So the pool got smaller. Obviously, people had a rough year working in restaurants, so they probably don't feel great about the industry. You know, and young local people don't really want to work unless it's for the higher end jobs that we have in the restaurant business. So it's challenging. This is probably the hardest hiring market during COVID that we've ever seen. So it's 10 times the effort for about 20% of the outcome.
Yeah. And just to remind everybody that you are listening or watching the Citizen Body, the Bodycast, as we call it. And if you are enjoying the content that you're seeing, you can always go to www.thecitizenbody.com. You can learn more about us, some of the philosophy that we're working towards. We're looking to getting some consulting for different businesses that you would like to adopt the content that they see. And also, if you like the content you see, there is a donate button as well. Brian, what have you found with, so you're saying that you're not getting people who want to work like that. So who is washing the dishes these days?
I mean, you get a lot of people who bust in from, you know, the city. You get a lot of people who come in from some of the surrounding communities. It's a very heavily immigrant population, which is actually, you know, terrific because you get to watch, you know, sort of the story I went through with my family when my grandfather came here. You know, I was privileged to be third in that, you know, line. And, you know, a lot of the hard parts were done prior to me. You know, I was born in a nice suburb in Delaware County and lived in a little house and had what I needed and did all those things. But seeing other families at the beginning of their journey kind of come in and make a ton of money and really work hard. And it's kind of neat. So it's a lot of people coming from neighboring communities, people coming from immigrant communities. And they're terrific. I mean, you know, I think without them, we would have trouble. I think the entire industry would be in massive trouble. But it's kind of neat because 10 years ago, it was kind of the thought process was that, you know, people were coming and they would get paid minimum wage and have hard work conditions, but now they're running everything. And it's wonderful to see generational transition. You know, and there's people who have only been in this country for short periods of time who, you know, make more than a lot of starting salaries at, you know, local schools and things in the neighborhood. So it's been kind of neat to see, and they really are the engine. I mean, they run a lot of the backstory stuff of all the restaurants. So industry wide, not just with me. So it's been great.
Yeah. So it's like, then it kind of begs the question of, how do we get that work ethic back? I mean, like, you know, you are a parent of small children. I have a small child, a very small child, and they're several years out of the workforce at this point. But how do we get them, you know, like to adopt or at least accept the value? Like, you know, we grew up with a harder work ethic, and how do we get them to accept that when what they see around them just doesn't reflect what we knew?
Yeah, you know, I think that's going to be a challenge. And I think that, you know, one of the challenges, a little bit philosophical for me, it's hard to, I think the biggest difference isn't just, you know, a work ethic variant between one generation to the other. I think it's the ability to be present that is harder for the younger generation with the amount of technology they're bombarded with. You know, the amount of instant gratification that, you know, things that jobs can't adapt that quickly, whereas that, you know, you feel like you're instantly gratified of your place in the planet, in the workforce, you know, day 3 of washing dishes. You know, and I think it's hard because they see so many things. It's sort of like they have work FOMO, and they have, you know, a camera into the world that I didn't have. So when I went to my job, and it sucked, and it did, I was with the people who were there, and I was kind of in the moment. I didn't have a cell phone to go sneak off and hide behind a car and, you know, look at my Facebook account. I just had to be there and fully immerse myself in what was happening, even if it was terrible. Here, there's always something else, and there's always something that would make you happier or better that's outside of there. And I think it's harder for the younger generation to be present and just find value in, you know, what you're learning from something. I mean, I look back now and I certainly didn't think of it when I was 15 or 16 years old, but you know, I was in the back of a trash truck. I was in a dish pit at a restaurant, and the things that that taught me led to so many good things that happened in my life. And I don't think we allow younger generations to experience that. We allow them to decide, and no 17-year-old who doesn't have to work for money is going to say, let me go torture myself and do something really hard to learn the value of being present, hard work, working your way up. I think we want to more give them an easier path, and that could be, you know, just a, you know, we're looking at the first few generations of humans in America that are very wealthy. And, you know, you're seeing big, you know, parents have a lot more money and they take care of a lot more things than, you know, sort of that greatest generation of people who are now in their 80s, 90s, or passed away. You know, they were Depression generation. They grew up where they didn't have anything. And I think that that was kind of how they raised their kids. And then sort of that baby boomer generation started saying, hey, like, we have a few bucks. We want a bigger house. We want a little bigger yard. We want our kids to have it a little easier. And there's some positive intentions from that, but I think we're also seeing the negative, which is, there's a little less grit, and there's a little less ability to just be present, put your head down and say, let's get really good at a job and learn a skill and develop relationships with, you know, the owner and the manager, and, you know, people who can help me later in life. So I don't know. I mean, we really try to invest in young people who come in and have that mentality, but it's hard to find that seed, you know, to kind of help grow at this point. So it's challenging.
Yeah. I know it's like my partner and I were both generation, you know, I think you are too, then you fall in Generation X, true?
Yeah, we're that lost generation that no one gives a damn about.
Yeah, you're in that little, like that little
Like
end
8
part, like
years,
you're not
12
quite
people, no one
millennial.
cares. Yeah. That's us.
But my parents were greatest, they were at the tail end of the greatest generation, and he was raised by boomers. And I always joke around, I'm like, you know, I'm the person who's squeezing the last couple of drops out of the toothpaste tube and, you know, recycling every scrap of paper, where like things that to him are a little bit more disposable. And I'm like, why is that plastic in the trash?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just funny, like, to really see like the difference, even though we're of the same generation. We grew up with, you know, different values. Like my parents were very, you know, very worried about like losing a job before, you know, and like their parents were very Depression era, and they raised them in that same way. So like at the tail end of that greatest generation, where, you know, things are starting to take a swing and get better, you know, and the baby boomers are coming around. You know, there's just a big difference in some ways about how we were raised, and where you, like, you know, you had to save every single thing, and you had to make do with what you have. And I had very similar to you, where it was like, you know, you're going to get a job, work hard, you know, figure out what you want to do. But, you know, if you want something, you want like these extra things, you're going to pay for them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I don't see a lot of that same thing, where it's like you want so badly to give your kids the things that you didn't have, that, you know, do you end up giving them too much?
I think that's a consequence of our lives being so much more visible with technology and so much more convenient, is that you cross that line and you think that you're temporarily in the moment creating happiness for yourself by giving that thing, and happiness for your child for getting that thing, and everyone's kumbaya and this is terrific. But sometimes failure, and sometimes earning, and sometimes no, and sometimes not getting what you want teaches you delayed gratification. It teaches you to build. It teaches you to, you know, start somewhere and kind of dig your feet in and try and climb and grow. And I think that that grit is a valuable skill that we're kind of glossing over with the good things we have in our lives now. And I think it's a disservice to the younger generation. And, you know, I think some of the younger people I interact with value that from me. I think others probably roll their eyes and think, this, you know, who's this old guy kind of saying in my day, you know, kind of thing. And there's probably some correct opinions on both sides of that. But I think that, you know, giving children and younger generations too much, it can make them soft. It can make them not know the hunger. It can make them not, you know, and the internet makes it worse. Anything you want right now, you could do in a minute. You could go find out any statistic, any fact. You can find a job. You can buy something from Amazon. And those are great things. But when your body becomes consumed with everything has to be instantaneous or now, it's hard to do hard things that have a long payoff, in your own life. And having a sucky job is kind of one of those things.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think we're disincentivized to want those. And if my mom was going to buy me a car and I'd have to drive my grandmom's hand-me-down red Chevy Lumina to my first banking job and look like an idiot, then I probably would have worked a little less hard to try and get my own car, because I looked ridiculous driving in this terrible car that I didn't even get access to until I was 22 years old. It's different. Kids today, it seems, I said that word I didn't want to say, kids today, but
Kids today.
I know a lot of younger people who they have really nice phones and they have really nice cars that their parents bought for them. And I didn't know anybody that had a car at 17 that was bought by their parents. So I guess there's pluses and minuses. I'd like to have my parents bought me a car back then, so I certainly won't talk down upon it, but I do value in hindsight the fact that when I wanted an expensive bike, my dad said, I'll put up $100. You put up 200, then you get a bike. And there was this value system that was very, laid out clearly for me in my house. There was not a lot of ambiguity in communication. That if I wanted a pair of fancy sneakers, my parents bought me $40 a pair of sneakers. I wanted Michael Jordans that were $110. Great. I needed to slide $70 across the table, and they would pay the 40 they would buy for the ugly sneakers I didn't want to wear. And then I could wear fancy sneakers, or I wore the sneakers that they were willing to pay for. They were my options. And I think that, we're a little bit more negotiating and partnering, and it's a little more kumbaya with younger people today. So it's a little harder to kind of value things that way. And I think it has an impact on the workforce a lot.
Yeah.
Challenging.
And also, like, you mentioned, like, with the internet having everything so accessible, you can buy, those sneakers, you can get them on Amazon and not even think about, how much money that you're spending. You're just like, oh, great, they're on sale, it's $10 off. I always think of something, I say, like, I know how much I make an hour, and I'm like, this is 2.5 hours of work.
Yeah.
And is that worth it to me? And I try to kind of keep that in mind. One of the things on the Citizen Body when we talk about is shop small, and not going like right to the internet, but walk into the mom and pop shop, find the place that sells, like, we've got a great place up it's down the street from one of your restaurants. I don't know if we're allowed to plug or not but it's Flacco's is a great example of that. It's a mom and pop clothing uniform store. You can get a tuxedo, you can get, you can go in there and get a pair of shoes. And I walked in there and I just happened to be looking around. I bought a few things and I looked at the price on the shoes that I would wear to work. And I don't need a new pair of shoes for work right now. I'm not in the market for it, but I was looking, I was like, it really is not costing that much more than if I were to go on the internet and look for these shoes. You know what I mean? I can get them quickly. I can get them delivered to my door. They can be there within 24 hours. But what a better day I had walking, 5 blocks up to this, wasting some of the shoe leather to walk up and, look around and see what my choices were, and comparison price to things. There's just so much that's available in the internet, and we really seem to be missing something when we like walk into that small business that can provide us with those things too.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I mean, it's something fortunate in a town like Conshohocken, because it's so constrained in physical space. It almost keeps 90% plus of the businesses, these small, owned by guys who live, the block away from their business type community. And it is. And, this year for Christmas, we decided to buy everything in Conshohocken for all of our, extended family, and anyone else going to buy a gift for, which, we would buy some things in Conshohocken, but I would be the guy that also would buy a lot of things on Amazon. And I would be proud that I got my Christmas shopping done in an hour, clicking through my phone, and everything was on its way. And it wasn't a lot of effort for me. But, this year, to try and support local, we made a commitment to do 100% things from Conshohocken. And it was neat. And, just the amount of conversations I had with people, walking into their store, and I've known a lot of them, previously or already. But I feel like it made me learn more about businesses that I maybe didn't know everything they carried, everything they did, everything they were, excuse me, we're trying to do. So you don't realize the local energy that provides when, you really do keep things small and local, and in a town that's 1 mile long, you're destined to walk past that person on the street tomorrow, or, the next day, or, at the local supermarket or something like that. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I always said before, you know, when I was younger and I lived with my parents, I was the one who always took the dogs out for a walk. I put them on a leash, and we lived in a very walkable neighborhood, but it was a suburb. You were not passing a store; you were just passing residential people's homes, and that's how you got to know the neighbors. Now that I live in a small town, and it's a different dog now, but I put the dog on the leash, take him for a walk, and you know that's where you see, you know, like a lot of your local business owned like people, you're more visible in the neighborhood, and you see more, you know, you find, you know, hey, that little place that you know I thought it burned down, hey look, they just built it back up again. We're going to
Right.
go in there one day when the dog's not on the leash. And you know, you really get more in touch with your neighborhood. Another thing that you did actually just kind of triggered me thinking about it. Tell me a little bit about Pieri Farms.
So in another moment of what I would say insanity, we went to go look at a property for sale that somehow was from some email list that I joined when I was probably just doing boring internet searches for cool things that I wanted to do. And there was a vineyard for sale in Quakertown, and it kind of caught my eye because I don't know a lot about Quakertown, but I don't think that it's, you know, the Napa Valley of the East. So I said, I got nothing to do on the weekend, I'm going to go take a look. And so I signed up to go for a showing, and it was nice. And it was strangely large Quakertown vineyard. And there were some things about it that were really cool, and it was a pretty house and all that kind of stuff, but it really didn't work for something I was going to want to buy. I couldn't figure out how to make this part of our company. So I met a realtor there who said, I actually have somebody who has a more raw, beautiful, larger property if you're looking for, you know, kind of start from scratch, build your own. And I really wasn't. So it kind of went from a curiosity that there's a vineyard in Quakertown to this person saying something that sounded really cool. So she goes, you want to go for a ride? It's about 20 minutes north of here in Bucks County. I said, great. And I went and I pulled into this property and said, I want to live here. This is amazing. So it just really trickled down from there. And, you know, I didn't really know much about farming, nor how to plant a vineyard. So we just started doing some preliminary testing and things you'd have to do to make sure the things you wanted to do could happen on this property. And everything kept checking out very well. So it was like one of those things where, like, you know, they came back and they said the soil was terrible, or this isn't a place you can plant these kind of crops, you know, probably would have died, and, you know, we would have moved on. And it was neat. We checked out this property. It's really beautiful. But everything checked out. So it kind of like the universe made it, you know, like checkmate to you. It's your choice. Like, things are going to work. It has what you need if you want to do these kind of things. So your move. I said, all right, let's try and do this. And we've always tried to internally make more of what we, you know, sell to our customers. You know, we make all of our own bread. You know, we make all of our own pasta. We make our own gelato. You know, our French fries, you know, we partner with potato growers that sell certain potato that we cut in house, and we prep a certain way. You know, it's a lot easier in a restaurant to just call up US Foods, buy a big bag of frozen French fries, throw them in the fryer, put salt and pepper on them, make them season well, and put them out. Our culture has always been like, let's do it for ourselves and let's build our own. Let's be, you know, learn how to become artisans at some of the little pockets of our business. So this was a chance to kind of do that on a massively larger scale and say, let's grow our own food. You know, we're all about food, where it comes from, who sourced it, and wine. Why don't we make those things? So I am usually very bad at being prepared, well-researched, well thought out with, you know, big projects, and more of a mindset of, you know, for lack of a better word, F it, let's do it. So it was just so beautiful. I said, all right, let's do it. Let's just figure this out. And here we are 2 years later, and it's 27 acres, and the vineyard's in the ground, and we have more vines coming in a week to add to it. And, you know, we have a CSA program that's now running. So we deliver local vegetables to people in Conshohocken. And
What's CSA?
So CSA is community supported agriculture. So basically a member signs up, and it's, you know, for a small membership or a large, and they basically pre-purchase a share of our crops. And then once a week we bring home a box as things are in season. And, you know, throughout the summer, things will, you know, change as the seasons change. And it's basically what we have, what's in the season and what's bountiful. We divide it up between all of our members. We fill up the box and we bring it home.
How many members do you have?
So we actually pivoted to a CSA heavy model during COVID because our restaurants were down so much. We didn't need as much produce. and it exploded. We thought, hey, maybe we'll get 20, 30, 40 members. We got 75, on a whim. And so this was great, and it really worked out well, and we got great feedback from the membership. So this year, I think we're at 110, and our membership closes mid-May, so we have about 15 days left. But we were happy this year, maybe we hit 80 or 90, and now we're almost at 110. It's more of a capacity thing. I just don't have the crops to fill more boxes or refrigerators to keep the boxes in at the restaurants. So we're going to kind of max out, probably over max out, and it's great. And it's a really personal way. I mean, we have the members have days they're allowed to sign up to come up, and they meet the farmer, and they take a walk, and they can pick their own stuff, and see where the tomatoes that were just in their box are growing. So for us, it was really a unique brand advantage of just kind of completing that whole loop. Like, yeah, our tomatoes might taste great in the salad, but now you can actually buy a box that you get your own tomatoes, and you can actually come visit. You can see Andrea, who's our farmer, planting the tomatoes or harvesting the tomatoes. So for us, it was kind of bringing that whole experience locally. I mean, the tomatoes are 20, 30 miles away in Bucks County. And then, myself or one of our other teammates actually drives them down the turnpike. And within hours, they are in our walk-in box. And, it's kind of really a local, small ecosystem that we've kind of tried to create for, our customers and our brand.
Yeah, and then that also drives some of your menu as well, because you use the crops that you've got in your menu.
Yeah, it's a little bit more back to the way it was before, sort of corporate formulas and very formulaic menu changes. Is we have a lot of spinach, so you're going to see a lot. I mean, you can tell when zucchinis come in, because my chefs will be on Instagram or whatever talking about every form of food we can make with a zucchini. And it's kind of neat because it's more what the earth provides. We're going to try and listen to the earth and not just say, I want to be selling avocados in January. And it's neat. It's a little bit more, what I would say, grounded process for us, and kind of localized and kind of driven by forces a little bit bigger than just ordering from Cisco, and whatever they have in their truck, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Now you can get strawberries in January. Now you can get, avocados in the middle of winter. You can get olives, things that are very seasonal, very temperature dependent. The world's so global now. You can get them. You run up the Giant. Everything's in season now, all the time. This is a little bit more traditional. Like, no, we're going to have kale for a while, and then there'll be no kale. Because it's too hot. So we're going to have tomatoes at that point. So it's neat. It's a more of a connected process for my team. And I think they really enjoy it for the most part. It's a lot of hard work. So there's probably points they don't enjoy it.
Yeah. Because then you've got to ship that, well, not shipped. I mean, you're probably just driving it, because your farm is about maybe 45 minutes to an hour away from.
45-minute drive. And then we make all of our CSA customers either pick up in Conshohocken or in Coopersburg, where the farm is. So it's point to point in 45 minutes. I mean, if you come right as the CSA window for pickup opens up, I mean, the stuff in your box was picked an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. So it's a pretty, tomatoes coming from Mexico in the middle of winter are typically gassed or picked early or left on vines in trucks, so that they don't obviously become mush by the time they enter the supermarket. But that tomato might be 8, 9, 10 days into its life by the time it gets to your refrigerator. And you can tell. I mean, the first time we really got our first full batch of tomatoes, and we would just take one that we got from a local supply store, we'll call it, for restaurants, and you cut them open and you just put one in your nose and then the other, and it's night and day. It's not like, an incremental gain of 10%. It's a different food. I can go get 99-cent a pound tomatoes in giant boxes and cases from big providers, and they taste like water. They taste, they're very unfragrant. And they're fine, and they don't taste bad. They just don't really, it's like when you go to Italy or eat a meal and say, why is this so much more flavorful? Half it's because you're probably drunk and drank wine, and you're in Italy looking at beautiful things. It just seems better. But the other half is it probably came from the garden behind the restaurant that's about 80 feet away from where you're sitting this morning. And, you realize that those things do matter. Not just having a tomato, having a good tomato, really matters.
Yeah, I noticed too, and I don't know what it is about the wine, but when I was in Italy, we were in an area that was just a little bit east of Tuscany, and it was where the Sangiovese grape was very prevalent. And I was on a bike trip, and I mean, every night it was like there were bottles of wine on the table. And that made me really, I learned to really enjoy wine when I was there. And if I go to the state store now and I grab a bottle of wine, I'll grab a bottle of Sangiovese, and I'm like, it's still good, but it's not the same.
I think a lot of it is, you can hit local small artisan producers over there. Obviously, things that make it stateside are bigger producers. They tend to be, because you're getting into the logistics of importing and exporting and label requirements and
Yeah.
government tariffs and things like that. So you can hit small producers that just are real artisans. You're pairing it with the best foods. I mean, wine tastes better when you put it with things that are local and naturally go with it. So I think just the overall, experience, it's the same thing when you go to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, the food's delicious, but the atmosphere is terrible and the vibe is kind of off and the staff's kind of, the best food in the world doesn't usually save that experience. It's kind of, in Italy, I feel like all your senses kind of get what you need. So everything, the espresso, the wine, the tomatoes, everything just tastes a little bit better. Plus they're pretty good at what they do. So,
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, you are pretty darn good at what you do, because your restaurants are fantastic. I can say that I have never had a so-so meal. I've never had a server that was kind of and like wasn't into what they were doing. Like, just every employee that I've ever contacted in one of your businesses is excited about where they are. They're happy to be at work that day. And it really shines through, because the food's fantastic. And this is really just another way for us, shopping small, is finding, a restaurant like yours and like your group is a gem. You're growing your own food. You're making, you've got an amazing menu. You also have a sommelier who pairs wine.
Yep.
That goes with them John makes great suggestions. You've really kind of got like the whole package covered.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to really build a brand versus just, kind of focus on the logistics and operations of, a restaurant or multiple restaurants. We've kind of embodied, everything that we've wanted to feel when we walk in, out of a restaurant, into who we hire and, what kind of leadership we value, and, kind of walking the walk, of the things that we put out there. I mean, we don't just put on our menu like fresh ingredients, we literally grow them. And for my customers to know that I'm probably out there cursing in a field trying to figure out what I just did wrong. But these are my Som, who you just mentioned, John, he's actually at our farm 2 to 3 days a week in the spring. So he's not your typical Som that will be dressed nice and just walking table to table, especially during COVID. He does a lot of that, but in the morning he's on a tractor, and we're, cursing, trying to figure out how to get a line of vines straight and, over a 300-foot span. And why are these weird bugs showing up on our tomatoes, and how do we get rid of them? And, so it's the people who, it's everyone does a little bit of everything. So, I have managers who work in a field, and also work on a floor of a restaurant. So I think that just by embracing the whole thing, it's really helped our brand and kind of the vibe and the personality of our people kind of come to the forefront. And, and they buy in. I have to give them full credit. It's a little nuts at times. It's a lot easier just to call a company and say, can you deliver this and deliver that, and put it in a walk-in box, and, the chefs walk out and they get it and they put it in a fryer. It's a way easier business. So I give them a lot of credit for kind of making the commitment to say, let's be real local and hyper, artisan in what we try and do. And, it's challenging at times, but I think it's really why our brand is what it is right now.
Yeah. I remember you also did with your tent on a Saturday afternoon when you weren't quite open yet. I remember you did a farmer's market.
Yeah. So there were no farmers markets, and we had a farm, and we had a ton of farm produce. I said, well, this is a terrible year to have a farm and produce and no farmers market. So we made our own. We built a cart and we put it out front, and we had like lines wrapped around the corner.
Yeah. I stood in those lines a few times.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Amazing.
And we didn't plan for it. So we were just kind of on the fly trying to figure out like, how do we do this? So we just set it up, and we're going to be doing it again this year. I think we're selling plants. The Saturday before Mother's Day, we're actually bringing a lot of the stuff we grow in our greenhouse, the starting plants for gardens, and we're bringing everything we don't need home. So you can kind of have locally grown, starter plants for people's personal gardens. And then we'll start selling honeys and chili oils and breads and things like that too. So it'll be back this year.
Oh,
So
excellent. We're going to be walking the Sunday before Mother's Day.
the Saturday before Mother's Day, we do like a one-time pop-up just because that's when everyone wants to kind of get their plants and their garden materials and all that kind of stuff. And then we bring it back full time, usually sometime in mid to late June, kind of once enough things are in harvest to kind of fill the cart. And then we
Yeah.
roll through summer until we, tomatoes start popping and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, I remember just as we're wrapping up, I remember this winter you had a drink on your menu. It was I don't remember the name of it, but it was an apple cider.
Yeah.
It was served warm. I think it had rum and a few other things in it. That was so good. And when I got it, I took a sip and I said, I can recreate this at home. And then I took another sip and I said, no, I can't. Not with the grocery store stuff. I said, no way.
Yeah.
Did you guys make the apple cider?
So our apples aren't ready yet. We do have an orchard at our farm. But the property a couple doors down from us is a vineyard, or I'm sorry, an orchard up in Upper Bucks County, and they produce all the apple cider for us. So then we obviously, added our own additions and made it a little bit more adult friendly with some of the additions. I will tell you a quick funny sidebar is we try to really focus on the packaging with that apple cider. So we use these really nice glass jugs and, we kind of branded them really well as we got a little better at it. And we had one incident where a customer took it home and, apple cider ferments, and eventually fermentation turns into alcohol, which produces a gas, and was totally nice about it and called us, but it had exploded. And basically was like, she left it sitting on a warm counter for several weeks. So it exploded and just kind of like hit every corner of our house with like an apple cider bomb. So in hindsight, it's hilarious because everyone's fine and it needs to clean up and, those kind of things. But those are kind of things you learn by adapting so quickly that we never thought like, oh, someone's going to leave this out. It's going to ferment. It's going to build up gas inside it and just blow up this container. So, there were some of the downsides to the quick adaptations we were making during COVID, but in the end, like I said, hopefully it'll be a funny story.
Well, I believe I bought one of those bottle. It was like a glass growler.
Yeah.
Of it. Yeah, it wouldn't have lasted long enough to ferment in my house.
See, that we figured everyone's drinking. It's COVID. No one had anywhere else to go. These things 1, 2, 3 days, it's gone, not 14, 15 days. And
yeah, I was like, who's leaving that out for that long? It's so good. I mean, I'm trying not to polish it off.
Yeah. And we didn't want to obviously insult the customer, but we were trying to explain that this is what happened. You could just go get apple juice at the store and it could ferment, and the sugar just starts to turn to alcohol, and the alcohol creates gas. And whether it's in plastic jugs or glass, it's eventually going to blow that thing up and, possibly explode. And, you don't obviously take the angle of trying to explain that. You just say, we're so sorry.
Can we help you with your cleaning bill?
Well, you signed this disclosure form and legal for now. It was good. So, we offered to help clean and said sorry and said, we have to be careful with some of this labeling and maybe say drink within 5 days and do not leave in the sun. But yeah, it's just kind of some of the funny memories from the crazy times.
Yeah. Well, so tell us where we find you on Instagram, Facebook, the internet, like people who are wanting to see a little bit more, learn a little bit more about your group.
So PieriHospitality.com is kind of the umbrella if you want to kind of check out our farmhouse, which we rent out to people. It's fully Airbnb'd. We do cool experiences up there if people want, chefs and catering, or they can just rent it and have a long weekend and girls weekend, guys weekend, couples, whatever. It's beautiful. It's right on the property. So you kind of see the farm and vineyard kind of going on right outside your window. Obviously all the restaurants are linked through Pieri Hospitality. People can follow me. I'm on Instagram. I love the aspect of social media that you can connect with customers so much more intimately than you could 10, 15 years ago. I love when someone leaves and said, just had this wine at Bar Luca. It was amazing. Where'd you get it? You didn't used to have those experiences because, you kind of leave. And if you weren't there that night and stop at that table, that person's kind of gone. Maybe they would leave you a review. Maybe they would email, but now with 4 companies, it goes to 18 different people on my team. This is direct one-on-one, so it's kind of neat. So all the restaurants have their own social media. So if anybody's interested in kind of seeing what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, by all means, take a peek.
So we're looking at Stone Rose.
Stone Rose.
Luca. Yep, Stone Rose, all one word. I got one word on Instagram.
So there's Stone Rose Conshohocken. Then it's Bar Luca. Then it's
Mhm.
Bar Sarah Conshohocken. And these are all linked through our website. So if people go to pierrehospitality.com, they can kind of link through to find social media, websites, menus, kind of whatever they're looking for.
And what about getting in on that CSA action and maybe being one of those people, one of the 150 getting a box? Can you link through it through there too?
You can link through it through there. You can sign up online. Everything is kind of done digitally. And then you'll just get a confirmation email and you'll get told when we start. And then you have 25 weeks of produce coming to your house, or you can pick it up at a restaurant. And the link's right there on the Pierre Farm website. I think there's 8, maybe 9 slots left. So if you want one and you're local, by all means, we'd love to have you, and say hello. It'd be nice. It's nice hearing from people on our websites and social media. So
yeah, great. Well, thank you again for joining us for the Citizen Body Bodycast, for focusing on small businesses and how do we adapt to change. I think we talked a lot about it and we got some good stuff.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is my first podcast, so I had a lot of fun. So I appreciate being on.
Yeah, it was awesome. So yeah, tell your friends, and you can find us on www.thecitizenbody.com. Again, that's a place, if you like the content that you're seeing, you can always donate towards us. And you can also, on our website, learn more about what we're doing. We've got articles, we've got artists, we've got cartoons, we've got music, all sorts of things that really just kind of help us get in touch with our community. So again, Brian, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Take care. See you later.
Take care. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.